In the lively, energetic city of Chicago lived a young, beautiful lady by the name of Jennifer Williams, who was a daughter of a deacon, raised in the church, and she came from a very well-known and respected family. People looked up to Jennifer's father and her mother because of what they stood for in the society. However, Jennifer had a boyfriend by the name of Peter Johnson, whom she had met while in university, but her parent didn't accept their relationship as Peter, a smooth talker and confident but was not connected to God or what you would call a believer in Christ, was not a kind of man they wanted their daughter to be seen around with. Despite her parents' warnings, she was still drawn to him. He and his family didn't believe in God, but that didn't stop Jennifer from liking him or change the way she felt about him. She prayed for him day and night, asking God to open his heart so he could be the man her family wanted him to be. Jennifer and Peter argued most times, her faith versus his ways of life, but they loved each other too much to let that come between them. One afternoon the young couple were sitting on a park bench with leaves swirling around them as she told him once again how much she wished he'd give church a chance. He nods but doesn't commit, though slowly after their conversation he started attending Sunday services with her every now and again. Her parents, once fiercely opposed to their relationship, noticed the changes he was making little by little. He started letting go of his wild ways, less partying, less drinking, and he would spend more time with her. One day as they attended church service together on their way out, they stood together by the door holding hands while Jennifer's parents watched them, saying to themselves he's trying, and if he kept going like that, they would give him a chance to marry their daughter and bless their union. It didn't take long for her parent to change their minds after a few months of watching Peter and getting to know him. He wasn't perfect yet, but they thought they could work with what they were seeing. Jennifer's parents decided to invite Peter and his family over for dinner for a proper introduction and talk about the way forward. Few days later Peter and his family showed up at the Williams Manor for dinner, which went well considering the backgrounds of two different families. They set the date of the wedding and started working towards it. A few weeks later, it was their wedding day, a moment of joy, with sunlight pouring through the stained glass, their hands joining together, promising each other forever in front of their families and friends, while her father stood in front blessing the union. As they began their married life, their Chicago apartment was filled with laughter, love, and hope. Soon she found out she was pregnant, and together, their dream of a beautiful future for their family was unfolding. Oh, she thought, but slowly, he starts drifting back to his old ways. Coming home late, drinking, and hanging out with friends who don't believe in anything but the wayward lifestyle. Jennifer would sit alone in their bedroom, a Bible open on her laps as she prays, crying out to God to intervene once more. The tension would escalate in the house as she pleaded with him to come back to the life they'd started. He would brush her off, saying he's fine, that she's worrying too much. She would always turn to her parents, who advise her to stay strong in prayer. Meanwhile, his friends, unbelievers, heavy drinkers, always tempting him, pulling him deeper into his old life. But she doesn't give up. Night after night, she's in church, on her knees, praying for God to work another miracle in his heart. Then one evening, while she's at church, the phone rings. It's the hospital. There has been a terrible car accident. It's your husband, they said to her. Please come to the hospital as he might need to go into surgery. As Jennifer rushed out of church, she fell down, which caused her to go into labor. Luckily there was other people with her in the church. An ambulance was called for her, and her parents alerted as well, who later came to the hospital to be by her bedside. Her parents were not happy with the turn of things upon hearing that their only daughter was in church when she was called to the hospital concerning her husband's accident. If not for Peter's way of life, this would never have happened, they said to themselves. But because of who they were and what they believed in, they quickly thanked God for Jennifer's life and the baby that had just been born with no harm. Jennifer gave birth in the same hospital that her husband was being treated, which made it easy for both families to visit both Jennifer and her husband. After a couple of days Jennifer was able to see her husband, who had already been told about the birth of his baby. The hospital room was quiet, machines beeping softly as she walked in to see him, bruised but alive. His eyes opened, and the first thing he said is, "I should have died," but she put her fingers on his lips and said to him, "God is faithful." He started to cry and asked his wife to forgive him for putting her through the pain she had just gone through and not been able to be at her bedside when she needed him. She takes his hand and tells him, through tears, that God saved him, because she was praying for him at that very moment that the accident happened. Something in him shifts. He realizes that his life isn't his own, and that night, lying in a hospital bed, he whispers a prayer for the first time while holding her hand. His transformation had begun. Peter was released after a couple of weeks from the hospital. Although he was on a wheelchair, that did not stop him from helping his wife caring for their new baby, as he wanted to show his wife that he cared for his family and that he had changed. He spent more time at home with his family, not because he was in a wheelchair, as he didn't take long before he was completely healed and out of the wheelchair. Meanwhile, Jennifer's parents came around more often to check on how the family was coping as well as pray with them. After the accident, Peter had changed completely. He gave his life to God, but it doesn't stop there. He began talking to his friends about God and how he had saved his life. The same friends who pulled him away, they laughed at him at first, but he was persistent. Over time, they see the peace in him, the joy that his old life never gave him. One by one, they start coming to church. One day Jennifer's parents were surprised but overjoyed seeing Peter sitting in church with all his friends with their hands raised in worship. Not long after, his family noticed the change in him, and his mother, who hadn't been to church in years, began to attend services as well. His cousins, who mocked his wife for her prayers, were now asking him for advice. At family gatherings and dinner, they would say grace for the first time in years. A ripple effect of transformation sweeps through his life. The church was then packed with people, many of whom were once lost but are now saved through Peter. He stood beside his wife, their baby in her arms, as they smiled at the pastor's sermon. His family and friends fill the pews, lives that had been touched by his story, his change, his way of life, and his decision to follow God. In the church where light poured in, illuminating the entire congregation. Outside, the Chicago skyline gleams in the sunlight, a symbol of redemption, faith, and the power of prayer. Peter's transformation influenced his family and friends, making the story not just about individual faith but about a community of lives changed by one person's journey to God. In this story, we learn how one's faith can turn around lives. Not one but many lives can be saved. In the book of Matthew 19 verse 26 makes us understand that with God, everything is possible. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment on the story, subscribe to our channel, and also turn your notification on, as this will help us to grow and continue to bring you more stories.